In this video, we are going to be taking this entire Wildfire lift that I have around me right now, and we're going to be installing it and putting it up for future use in Car Creations video. So this is very exciting. So make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, as the video is going to be epic. All right, so laid out in front of me, we have all the parts. We have the pillars that the lift is going to rest on. We have the casters, because one of the key functions of this lift is to be able to have the feature of pushing it around the shop. These two struts in front of me hold the ramps and basically what brings the lift up and down. And here we have the ramps for the car to drive onto the lift. And then behind the camera, we have the two ramps themselves, as well as all the pieces that we're going to need to put this lift together. Super exciting, and we'd like to thank Wildfire Lifts for helping us get this lift. If you want to see more of their lifts, we have a link in the description, but most of all, let's get building, and it's super exciting. First things first, we're gonna get this ground completely cleared out of the way with all these parts set aside so we can get the ground prepped and ready to put the post on. All right, so next we're gonna do the upright column and cross-section installation, and we're gonna do it for the back. So first of all, we're just getting it all laid out, and then we're gonna be able to lift it up to the proper position.
All right, so to help align everything, posts have been put on. These are the tops that actually, the caps, they go inside the top of the post. To hold the post up, you just jam them underneath a couple of feet back, and that gives you plenty of space to be able to lift up the main arm and slide it on. But before you go ahead and slide it on, there's one other critical part. You need to be able to hold the lock open while you're sliding on, otherwise it'll jam as soon as it hits here.
Bend this in and then jam it in there, and it holds the lock from sticking out when you're trying to slide it on. So when you try and slide it on, you actually just have to pivot that on.
Before we slide it all the way down, we have to put some nylon spacers in here so that it's actually sliding on nylon spacers, because that keeps the paint from getting scratched up, right?
The instructions said to stick them in after you've stood this up, but we found while it's still down, sticking them in, it says you need a hammer, but we're finding that you don't even need a hammer. We noticed that there's the notched ones, and they go in this top corner here, because the regular ones will stick out down here where this latch goes. Not that it's a huge deal, but might as well put them in the right place. But stick it in there, and then it fits nice and flush with this edge.
And then ultimately we're going to end up sliding it down to position number 6, which is hole number 6 down here, and then we'll be able to stand it up. Pull that nylon out, and then she goes. Bam, done.
All right, so now that we got that on, or I guess they got that on, we're gonna stand this section up. When you stand it up, make sure that it's around 3 feet from the wall. Get all you guys back together again, and we're gonna get this next section set up. All right, so our next step is to put these little stoppers on that basically stop the nylon pieces from coming out the top. What you're gonna do is you got a 5mm Allen key. On the bolt, you're gonna put the lock washer, and then the washer, and then it goes straight on. All right, so the next step requires a tractor, or at least a motorized mount, because we're gonna lift up the ramps, and we're gonna be putting them on top over here. However, before we lift up the ramps, we're gonna have to come over here, and with the tractor underneath supporting them, or with the motorized lift, or whatever you're gonna use, we're gonna have to take out the bolts so we can free this contraption.
Putting these bolts in, you're supposed to tuck the bolt in and stick it through this side, but lining it up is very hard. So before you stick it in there, to line it up, you stick it through here and push through, and then you push this around and adjust it so that it's good, lined up, and then you pull it out, stick it in this side, and it's all lined up for you nicely.
All right, next step, putting the caps on. The pointy bits will face in, because if you notice, they actually cover up these wheels here when it rises. There's another one with 4 holes right here. That goes on either the back right or front left.
Nice.
Super easy. All right, you might notice that we have these troughs facing inwards. They are the jack rails.
Next up, we have all the cables that we have to run, but first we have to cut these cable ties out and then wire all the cabling for the lift.
Next step is that we're gonna take these cables and we're gonna route them right through the ramps here, through this one, and then up the post. We found that a helpful tip is that you remove the hardware before you try to route it through the lift, because else you'll run into all sorts of fitment problems as you're trying to fit it through a small place.
So the hydraulic gram underneath here, they compress it for shipping. So all the cables are actually the shortest length they can be at. So in order to get it to the point where you can actually hook the cables up to the top of the post, pull it out, which isn't too hard, and then you get more cable length. You run it underneath this one, and then you run it on the other side of this one, and it's neat because when you are putting the lift up and down, it will deactivate the lock. Pass this up to Ethan.
All right, now that I have the mic. So the washer goes on first, and then the 2 bolts go on top of that, and it locks it down, just like that.
In order to weave this bolt, which is hard, through this, the easiest way I found to do is actually loop the entire cable in a big loop back on itself, and then feed the bolt part up through, and then as it gets smaller, twist it back around so it pops through. Otherwise it jams up in here.
So we have the safety linkage lever, which comes with a spacer and this nut. So first you put the spacer on the lever, insert it in the hole right here, slide it in. Before you get too far though, you want to come underneath. There's a little window here. Find the lever, you put the bolt on there.
And so the bolt on there just winds all the way down to the bottom of it.
There is this black shaft that runs all the way from this end all the way to the other end, where it will hook up on the other side. And you take the 2 and you screw the safety linkage lever into this shaft, and then you tighten that right up against there so that there's no play in the threads. So now you have the same thing. It's just that side has the lever or the crank. This side's just has a stopper. Stick the spacer on first, then you stick it through the hole. Put the nut on, and then you hook it right up like you did on the other side. Okay, so when you're putting the safety linkage lever on, it's important to note this. So there's the spacer in here, and there's a spacer on both sides. And what you want to do is have not too much play in the spacer, just enough so that this can still turn freely, not enough that you can slide the spacer back and forth. So in order to do that, you actually have to tighten this and twist it around once you get it hooked up to the black shaft underneath. But we found that if you just take off this nut from this mounting bolt, it makes it a ton easier to spin this. So that's a little tip for you.
All right, so now we're gonna put the linkages on. So you wanna do the one that comes from the far end at the top, the one that goes close at the bottom. You set this to around the 1 o'clock position, and then you just start screwing it in. It's backwards, it's kind of ready tighty. Lefty loosey is a bit weird. And then you want to put the lock nut on, and then the nut itself.
You want to get yourself a 9/16 wrench, go around and tighten all of these up.
All right, next we're going to install the power unit, and it starts with the power unit bracket. It looks like this, and we're just going to put it at the top of the post that has 4 screw holes in the top. So we're going to put it on right here, and we're going to put the lock nut on top, and then the washer, and then it's going to quickly hand tighten them all in to secure it. All right, we're going to take a 5.5 Allen key, and we're just going to tighten them all down.
So the next step is we have to mount the hydraulic motor to the bracket that Ethan just mounted. So to tighten all of the bolts for the bracket, we got to use a 14mm socket.
All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is hook up the hydraulic hose. So this bolt comes off, and then we want to poke it through the hole up here. That comes through. We're just going to put this back on. The straight end is going to go onto here. We're just going to screw that on. And then the elbow joint is going to go around to here. Then we're just going to tighten it up, and we're all set.
So the next step is to fill the tank with our hydraulic fluid. And for now, we've actually just detached the hose from the back of it so that we can have airflow when we're pouring the fluid in.
So once filled, we're going to connect it back up again, and then we get to bleed it. The directions say that you need this angle over here set to 5 o'clock. Have to start bleeding it. She goes.
There's the lift.
All right, so now that these are nice and taut, they hug right next to the pulley down here. So if you come down here, you can now put these guards on so you can't get your fingers in there and get them lopped off. There we go. 5mm Allen key bolts, and then we're just gonna put them 2 on each side. Put them on every single one of the posts, and then you're pretty much done. our video. We hope you enjoyed. If you are interested in this lift or taking a look at any of the lifts that they have to offer, head over to www.wildfirelifts.com and there are a huge selection there for you to take a look at. We hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below and we'd love to answer them. But most of all, please like, please subscribe, and please have an amazing rest of your day.
Who will pull more views as the thumbnail? Ethan? Or me? Or Dad?
Well, me. Some good old Australian flavour.
We need like one of those like clickbaity bubbles that points to him and says Australian.
Australian with a kangaroo.